Just a Little Dare by Hooliganships. Chapter 3 Getting Closer. As Nami had correctly predicted, they arrived at the Winter Island around midday the next day. It was a fairly big island that was focused mainly on the visitors that came by. To maximize their income, the Marines' presence was minimal, making it the perfect place for pirates to stop by. It was exactly what they needed to lay low and have fun for a few days, and Luffy was bouncing off of the walls in his excitement. "We can build snowmen and igloos and make snow angels and have snowball fights!" His excitement knew no bounds, and Usopp and Chopper were just too happy to join in. Sanji was trying to ignore them while he contemplated his grocery list, but when they were getting too loud, he threw them out of his kitchen. He went back to his list, finally alone. For a short second, he wondered where Zoro had gone off to, but after that, he scolded himself. He didn't care what the moss head did with his time. Sanji only needed to be charming to him when he was around. There was no reason to think about him when he wasn't there. But still, he did. He had last seen him after breakfast, where he had helped him with the dishes again. It seemed to be something that Zoro was determined to make part of his routine now. Sanji certainly wouldn't complain too much about it. On the one hand, he didn't need help, especially not from Zoro. On the other hand, though, it was nice not to do it alone. Brook volunteered to take the first watch at the Sunny while the rest of them made their way into the town. As soon as they docked their ship in the harbour, they spotted another reason for Luffy's good mood to skyrocket. "Taurao!" he yelled, jumping up and down excitedly before shooting his arms out and catapulting himself from the ship. The man in question had just emerged from his ship, and Sanji could see how he froze to the spot at the yell of his butchered name. The look on his face was a weird mix of excitement, dread, and resignation. An apt description of all their feelings when their captain got into one of his moods. Sanji would feel sorry for him, but if Law was here, that meant none of them had to babysit Luffy. Collectively as one, the Straw Hats turned their heads away from the scene unfolding on the docks. Maybe if they just pretended not to know the human pretzel that Law and Luffy had turned into, they could slip into the town unnoticed. The Heart Pirates didn't seem to have that problem as they stood on the deck of their ship and laughed and hollered down to the captains. Sanji pulled out his list one last time to take a look at it when he felt someone step up next to him. Even Zoro had yielded to the cold and switched back to one of his outfits with a close shirt, a thick coat thrown haphazardly over his shoulders. "I'm coming with you," he said, while gesturing to Sanji's list. "Oh?" Sanji asked, his eyebrow raised and a teasing smile on his face. "Can't get enough of me already? Or are you afraid you'll get lost if you don't hold my hand?" The smile on Zoro's face turned strained for a short second, and Sanji snickered. "The first one, of course." The green-haired man reached out and took Sanji's hand in his. "And I'll take any chance where I can hold your hand, darling." That smooth motherfucker. Sanji was going to kill him. He cleared his throat and looked away before answering. "Well, if you insist, I guess you can help me." Together they left the ship, their hands still clasped tightly between them. It was a lot less awkward than their last time holding hands had been. It was also a lot more comfortable because of the freezing temperatures. Their crew stopped shortly next to the polar tang to greet their allies. Law was still trying to shove Luffy off of him, but the younger captain ignored all of his tries and only wound his arms even tighter around him. "Thank you for taking care of our captain for us, Law. We appreciate it," Nami said with a sly smile and a wink in his direction. Law was about to spit some choice words back to her. Sanji was sure of it, but suddenly his gaze seemed to catch on something, and he stopped moving. "What is that?" he asked instead, pointing at Zoro and Sanji. Confused, the two looked around, unsure what he meant. "Huh?" Luffy said, as confused as they were. "Did you hit your head, Taurao? That's Zoro and Sanji." "I know that," the older man exclaimed, "but what are they doing?" "Holding hands." "But why?" "Because they're dating." "They're what?" "It's a long story," Usopp interrupted, before someone could do something they would regret. Sanji was already thinking of jumping into the ocean and ending it all. Zoro looked more like he was contemplating pushing Law into the ocean. "We'll tell you about it later. We have to go now, though. See you later. Try to keep Luffy out of trouble." With that, Usopp pushed Sanji and Zoro away from the docks, the rest of the Straw Hats hot on their heels. Luffy's happy yell of, "See you later, guys!" followed them up into the street of the city. Zoro had to admit walking around town with Sanji's hand in his wasn't so bad. If the other could just stop bitching, that was. "We're lost. We're not lost, and even if we were, you were the one who was leading." "I know," Sanji let out a wail and put his free hand up over his eyes. "I can't believe your terrible sense of direction is contagious." He shook their combined hands for emphasis. "If you think that you can simply let go of my hand..." The smile Sanji gave him bordered on mean, and the grip he had on Zoro's hand turned painful for a second. Not a chance, honey. Zoro shrugged. Suit yourself. Let's go that way. No, Sanji screamed, digging his heels into the ground. We're going back to civilization. I need to finish buying everything on that list, and when the Heart Pirates are here, that just means Luffy will demand a feast tonight. I don't have time to dick around in the forest. Way to ruin the romantic atmosphere, Zoro said in a fake put-out voice. Sanji glared at him before giving him a slightly forced smile. I promise if we finish everything in time, I'll take you on a date tomorrow that'll knock your socks off. Zoro snorted. Sure, let's go. Finally, but I'm leading. They did make it back to the town in a relatively short time. Zoro wasn't surprised. He had known exactly where they had been the entire time. It was Sanji's fault for not trusting him. They managed to get everything on Sanji's list, and then some. Sanji looked at the mountain of food that they were carrying back to the ship and sighed. I just know I'll have to make this same trip at least 3 more times while we're here, especially with the extra mouths now. Can't the Heart Pirates eat at their ship? Sanji looked almost offended. Are you saying their food is better than mine? What? No, Zoro said, confused. I just meant they have their own food. They should eat that instead. Have you ever eaten penguin's food? Yeah, Zoro said. It wasn't half bad. Sanji nodded in agreement. It's good food, but not to be arrogant or anything, but if you had the choice between eating my food and his, who would you choose? Yeah, okay, Zoro was forced to agree. Sanji seemed pleased with his answer, and they dropped the topic. When they finally arrived at the ship, they saw that it had already been invaded by a large part of Law's crew. Penguin and Shachi were talking with Usopp and Frankie about something, while Beppo was standing with Nami and Chopper. A few other members of Law's crew were talking to Brooke and Robin, but they were too far away to make out who they were. Law and Luffy were nowhere to be seen, and Zoro was kind of glad. It was hard enough to deal with Sanji and his new relationship as it was. He didn't need any more comments from the creepy surgeon of death. I'm going to go find the idiot captains and ask them what their plans for the evening are, Sanji announced after they had placed all of their groceries in the kitchen. Would you mind starting to put these away? Without thinking, Zoro nodded, but froze after a second. Sanji didn't notice, as he had already left the kitchen. That had been the first time that Sanji had asked Zoro outright for something. A warm, pleased feeling spread through his chest. That kind of terrified him. He was supposed to woo the cook, not to get affected himself. Throwing a look towards the groceries, he had an idea. It was time to mess with the other man, at least a little bit. It had been way too long after all. After confirming with his captain and his captain's ally that they would indeed have a feast tonight, Sanji made his way back into the kitchen. It seemed Zoro had already stowed away all of the groceries and was taking out bowls for the preparations. Seeing him move like that through Sanji's kitchen filled him with a certain warmth that he crushed rigorously under his metaphorical heel. There was no time for that now. Zoro looked up as soon as he entered the room and gestured to the pantry. I put everything away. I hope you're happy with it. There was a glint in his eyes that Sanji couldn't quite place. That, together with the strange wording, let him feel automatically wary. What did you do? He demanded to know. The look Zoro threw him was a bit too innocent for Sanji to believe him. I put the produce away, like you told me to. Suspicious, Sanji squinted his eyes at the other man, but let it go. There was too much to do to engage in petty squabbles right now. He walked over to the pantry door and opened it, and promptly stopped in his steps. Everything had been put into the pantry. That much was definitely true. But nothing was where it should be. Sanji had a very precise system for all the things they stored in here, and he was pretty sure most of the crew members knew about it. And if maybe only 1 or 2 things hadn't been at the right place, Sanji would have put this under a mistake or a misunderstanding. But for every single item to be at the wrong place, there had to be intent here. He gritted his teeth while turning around. He gave Zoro a clear, forced smile that the other seemed to delight in. Thank you so much for helping me, honey. His jaw was starting to hurt from the pressure he was putting on it. You deserve a break. How about you go out and help the others? No, I think I'm exactly where I want to be. But thank you, darling. That son of a bitch. Slowly, Sanji let out the air in his lungs and counted backwards from 10. He could do this. He was a master chef. He could get his dinner done, even with added sabotage from his boyfriend. So Sanji turned back around and started gathering the things he needed. It took him almost twice as long as usual because of the new placement of the food. He vowed to take a late night tonight and put everything back into order, but now was not the time. He had dinner to finish. He dumped the vegetables on the counter and put Zoro to work. Even with the added tension between them, they still managed to work seamlessly. He even managed to hold back his sharp remarks when Zoro innocently asked him where something was, because he just couldn't find it in the pantry. Smart ass bitch. The last straw was when Sanji started to prepare the dessert and asked Zoro to go get him a bag of flour from the pantry. After a clearly exaggerated stumble from the normally so graceful swordman, Sanji had gotten his bag of flour, all over his clothes, hair, and face. Are you fucking serious right now? Sanji asked. Oops, Zoro said, absolutely unconvincing. I'm sorry. No, not yet you are, Sanji growled out before he launched himself at the swordsman. He wrapped both his arms and legs around him in a vice-like hug. Thank you so much for your help today, honey. And with that, he dumped the handful of flour he had into Zoro's hair and down the back of his shirt. The other man let out a loud yell and tried to pry Sanji off, but the cook was persistent. They ended up wrestling on the ground, rolling around, and throwing hands of flour at each other. Sanji didn't know when he started laughing, but he didn't care. He was too busy enjoying the dumb look on Zoro's face when Sanji managed to hit him with another bit of flour. Hey! A high-pitched yelling interrupted them. What are you two doing? Above them stood Nami, hands pushed into her hips and looking at them like they were crazy, which, in all fairness, was probably a good assumption on her part. Quickly, the two of them stood up and tried dusting themselves off, but just ended up making all of them cough. We got a bit caught up, Sanji admitted sheepishly. Sorry, Nami-san. The food will be ready soon. She just raised her brow at them both before shaking her head and leaving the kitchen again. Zoro and Sanji hurried to get everything done and in the oven before turning to each other again. We should probably change, Sanji said with a look at their ruined clothing. You think so? Zoro lifted an eyebrow and clapped himself against his chest. A puff of flour flew through the air. Together they made their way back towards their bunks and changed into a new set of clothing. Sanji reached out a hand towards Zoro. Give me your clothes, I'm going to wash them later. The look Zoro gave him was a bit wary, but in the end he relented and handed over his shirt and pants. Sanji put them with his own, and they went back into the kitchen. With the help of the others, it had been easy enough to build a table big enough to hold all of them and put out the dishes. Everyone was having a good time, even though Law seemed to give him and Zoro a few confused looks. Sanji couldn't blame them. He didn't understand the situation either. The party stretched long into the night, and it could almost be considered early again when Sanji finally finished organizing his pantry. Grumbling under his breath, he made his way back towards the bunk room when he remembered the dirty clothes. While looking at the pile next to his bunk, he had a sudden and brilliant idea of how he could get revenge on the mosshead. Giggling to himself, he set to work. Zoro had woken up multiple times that night. First, when Sanji had come to bed after rearranging the pantry. He had felt a little bit bad about that, after all. But on the other hand, why couldn't Sanji just leave it for the next day? There was no reason to do it in the middle of the night. Instead of going to bed, though, the other had left again. Zoro had been confused when the cook had left the room again immediately after. Where was he going? He hadn't been able to hold the thought in his head, and he had fallen asleep again. He woke up one more time when Sanji finally came to bed, but the answer to the second disappearance didn't present itself until the morning. As usual, he woke up when Sanji got up to make breakfast. It was later than normal, but the rest of the crew was still sleeping after a night of partying. Zoro opened his eyes and just caught Sanji's back disappearing through the door. He gave a lazy stretch and prepared to get up as well. He had made it his mission to help with the meal prep, and he would do it, no matter how bad of a hangover he had. That's when he noticed the bundle of clothing at the foot of his bed. Sanji must have washed them last night. A burst of warmth spread through his chest, and he couldn't help but smile. If he wanted to be, the cook was able to be pretty nice and considerate. A few minutes later, he was ready to take back his earlier thought. The cook was the worst. He deserved no mercy. Dressed in just his pants from the day before, he stomped into the kitchen, the freshly washed clothes in his arms. He was greeted by a sunny grin. Morning, honey. Good morning, darling, Zoro pressed out between gritted teeth, barely holding on to his temper. Did you wash our clothes last night? Why, yes, I did. Sanji's grin was so smug, Zoro could almost taste it. You're welcome, by the way. Thank you so much. There is only one problem. He unfolded the pants and the shirt and held them up to his body. Both seemed a little bit too small for him. I don't think they're going to fit anymore. Oh no! He put a hand up in front of his mouth in a gesture of over-the-top shock. Sanji's wide eyes were almost comical. I'm so sorry, but I mean, they're not that small. Surely you can still wear them. They're so small, they would fit you better than me. His eyes widened at the idea. In fact, I think I'll give them to you. I'll just have to buy new clothes today. And what are you going to wear until then? Your birthday suit? Oh, I'm going to wear a suit all right, don't you worry. I'm leaving this in your bunk for later, darling. And with that, Zoro turned around to put his plan into motion. He waited until everyone had already arrived in the kitchen for maximum effect. He walked in and went straight to his seat. He ignored the silence and the stares of his crew and looked at Sanji, whose face was very red and his eyes were very wide. Perfect. He leaned in close and pressed a kiss against his cheek. The suit jacket strained a bit at his movements, but nothing ripped open, so he counted that as a win. Sanji's clothing was a bit too tight for his liking, but they were doing the job he wanted them to do. Thanks for lending me your clothes. They're a bit tight, but they'll do, till I can replace the others. From the other end of the table, he could hear Law quietly mutter, "What the fuck?" But he ignored him. If he acknowledged any of the others, his act would be over, and he would die out of embarrassment. He calmly started eating, and mentally patted himself on the back for a job well done, by the look on Sanji's face. Ha! Take that, shitty cook. Sanji was most definitely not okay. How could he have predicted his prank would backfire this heavily? He was sitting at the breakfast table and trying to eat, but he wasn't able to concentrate with Zoro sitting next to him, wearing Sanji's clothes. How dare he? That asshole! And even more importantly, why did he look so good? Sanji knew logically that Zoro had worn suits before, and Sanji had even seen him wearing said suits, but he couldn't remember ever feeling like this before. Maybe it was the fact that Zoro was wearing Sanji's suit, and that it wasn't as loose as most of the clothing Zoro preferred. It was tight and hugged every part of Zoro's body and made him look almost obscene, which made no sense, because Sanji had seen Zoro half naked and naked more times than he could count. What was it about this Zoro that made Sanji's higher brain functions say their goodbyes? The others seemed to have accepted this new reality they were forced to live in relatively quickly, except for Law, who was still switching between staring in bewilderment down at his plate or over the table at Zoro and Sanji. Sanji still couldn't blame him. It was a lot to take in. After they finished with breakfast, Zoro insisted upon helping him with the dishes again, claiming he hadn't been able to help with the preparations beforehand. He shrugged off the suit jacket, and then he had the audacity to roll up the sleeves of the shirt, which was just plain rude. How was Sanji supposed to do the dishes when Zoro's arms looked like that? Just before they finished with the last dish, Luffy ran into the room, wearing one of Nami's favourite outfits. Both Zoro and Sanji just stared at him for a few seconds. Luffy? Sanji asked carefully. Why are you wearing Nami-san's clothes? Huh? Isn't today a we wear whatever we want day? Why aren't you wearing Zoro's clothes? That made Zoro smirk and chuckle. Yeah, darling. Why aren't you wearing my clothes? I gave you something this morning. Are you ashamed of me? The smile Sanji gave him in return was as sweet as sugar and as sharp as the knife he was holding. I could never be ashamed of you, honey. I simply would like to wear your shirt tonight when I am sleeping. It looks very comfortable, and it makes me feel closer to you. The look on Zoro's face told Sanji everything he needed to know. 1 point for the cook. Well, whatever. I'm going to go show the others. And with that, Luffy disappeared out the door again. Just a few seconds later, they could hear Nami's enraged scream, and something that sounded suspiciously like Luffy screaming. After making sure that the captain hadn't been brutally murdered, he was able to escape Nami, but they saw him run around in Law's signature coat and hat, while his own straw hat had been shoved onto the other captain's head. They decided to head out too, to replace some of Zoro's clothing. Sanji insisted on coming with him, since he couldn't trust Zoro to not buy horribly plain or clashing clothing. Like right now, Sanji said, gesturing to Zoro's shoes. It's a crime that you want to pair that kind of suit with those shoes. In place of an answer, Zoro just rolled his eyes and mockingly tried to squeeze his foot into Sanji's shoe instead, which didn't work out very well. It's not as if I can fit into yours. And while we're talking about shoes, how do you fight with these? He lifted his leg, one of Sanji's black dress shoes still hanging off his toe. Aren't you supposed to fight using your legs? How do you not have to replace them after every fight? And wouldn't your kicks pack even more of a punch if you wore boots like mine? Now it was Sanji's turn to mockingly try on the other's shoes. He frowned as he stretched his toes. How do you walk in these? It feels like I'm walking with cement around my feet. Shoes are supposed to protect your feet, you know. I can protect my own feet, thank you. That made Zoro snort. That didn't even make sense, idiot cook. The insult sounded a lot fonder than usual, and when Sanji looked up into Zoro's face, the other was smiling at him. Sanji couldn't help but smile back. We both look ridiculous. Can I have my shoes back, please? Sure. They exchanged their shoes and finished getting dressed in their winter gear for outside. They made their way into town towards one of the many clothing stores they had seen the other day. Sanji's eyes couldn't help themselves and sometimes lingered on the beautiful women who called this town their home, or were simply here to shop. A sharp tug on his hand made his gaze snap back towards Zoro, who was walking next to him. You wouldn't cheat on your date, would you now? The smirk on Zoro's face was smug as he raised an eyebrow. Where's the romance in that? Sanji grinned back and tightened the grip on Zoro's hand until the other was scrunching up his face in pain. Don't worry, honey, Sanji reassured him. I have only eyes for you. Zoro rolled his eyes and looked forward again, but Sanji's gaze lingered. Zoro did look good in Sanji's clothing, but even more than that, he simply looked good. His face had sharp, attractive angles, his skin was unblemished and had an attractive tone to it. He was built, and in the suit he almost looked sophisticated, if you ignored the horrible boots on his feet. And he noticed another thing. He wasn't the only one looking at the green-haired swordsman. He saw a few women and men give Zoro approving looks. Sanji frowned. Sure, those people were looking now, but as soon as they talked with Zoro, they would back off. After all, the other was rude, had no manners, loyal, dedicated, honest to a fault. No, wait, that wasn't where Sanji had wanted to go with this. Was there something to Zoro after all? Was Sanji actually in danger of losing this bet? No, that couldn't be it. There was no way that Sanji would fall for Zoro. But as he looked around, he understood that someone else very easily could, and wouldn't that mean Sanji had lost as well? He would lose the bet, of course. He was talking about the bet. Nothing else. Hi. So this is chapter 3 out of 6. Getting closer to the end, which is sad because I really like this fic and I wish it could go on forever. But yes, thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.